Hello, good people. Todd Shannon, data scientist, social commentator, getter of buckets. What are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about the fact that I was right. Well, I'm usually right, but this time I was righter than usual, as evidenced by my very sentiments being echoed by one Ben Shapiro on his show today, The Daily Wire. Now, it is not often that Ben Shapiro gets the privilege of uttering something that I already said. But Ben, with a little practice and a little oomph, you can get on my level. Ben, I believe in you. But what was he right about? And what was I right about? Well, it's a concept that I was developing in a video that I did called The Culture War. And it's a series that I actually want to do. And I'm trying to just find the right cadence and time to do it. But I talk about in The Culture War what the culture war is exactly and why it rages so intensely on our soil. Because the culture war really today is I can't say an all-time high. I mean, I think you'd have to probably give the nod to the Civil War, right? for the most intense culture war ever, because it became like a literal war. But from the standpoint of modern times, the culture war actually rages pretty high with respect to my generation. And so it's important to understand what that's about. My general premise was that the culture war is a result of vastly different value systems held by different people in the same country. And there is a battle on who gets to control the culture. I explained in this video that culture is essentially the environment that causes certain things to grow and inhibits the growth of other things. So with respect to our attitudes, our values, our dispositions on any given topic, from God to work ethic to politics, the culture and who gets to set the terms of the culture, the environment that causes those things to grow, is very important. It's a high stakes game, right? It's a high stakes situation. And so naturally, it's going to spill over into every area of our lives. So before we get into the details of what I talked about, I want to show you what Ben said in his show today on the Daily Wire, and then we'll circle back to how I grounded my view. I think it will reinforce it nicely and kind of fill in some of the gaps. So we'll go to Ben's talk and start there. Before we get started, just to orient you, basically he's talking about this concept called the forgotten man. It's a concept in politics about who in politics often gets forgotten and how that person is impacted by the efforts of politicians and fellow citizens.
As soon as A observes something which seems to him wrong, from which X is suffering, A talks it over with B. And A and B then propose to get a law passed to remedy the evil and help X. Their law always proposes to determine what C shall do for X, or in better case, what A, B, and C shall do for X. What I want to do is look up C. I want to show you what manner of man he is. I call him the forgotten man. Perhaps the appellation is not strictly correct. He is the man who is never thought of. I call him the forgotten man. He works, he votes, generally he prays, but he always pays. Right? So who's the forgotten man, according to Sumner? That is the person who has the traditional values. It's the person who goes to church, the person who supports his community, and the person who is targeted by the people in the elite class on a values level, because they don't care about his values. They don't care about that. And he's always the person who they are taking from, both in terms of values for themselves, and then attempting to destroy the values and institutions upon which he relies. And they're also taking from economically in certain ways as well. But it's really more about the values than it is even about the economic takings. Because the truth is, in the United States, the people at the very top of the economic spectrum pay nearly all income tax. It is not the middle class paying income tax in the United States. It is the rich people paying income tax. So really, what is this? It's not a class conflict. It is a values conflict in which you have an elite group at the top who are promulgating a set of values that is absolutely destructive and that they themselves do not live by to people in the middle class and people who are in the lower economic classes. That is not an economic conflict. That is, in fact, a community struggle, as I say. That is not part of the history of class conflict. It's a community struggle. And this is what is undergirding David Brooks's column today. It's a fascinating column in the New York Times where he's trying to grapple with the Trump phenomenon. He can't quite escape the sort of Marxist tinge to all history being described by class conflict. But it is starting to dawn on him that perhaps attacks on traditional Judeo-Christian values are, in fact, the defining feature of our politics right now.
All right. So I think very well said. Very well said. Round of applause for Ben Shapiro. Now he's reading an article about this, and he reads this passage about the forgotten man. And I think it's well said, because this really, our culture war is about the attempt for some, and most of them on the left, to supplant every bedrock principle of biblical and Judeo-Christian values that we have in our country. They want to supplant and to completely subvert everything we believe. They want to queer all the things, as it were. And queer is a broader term. It's not just referring to sexuality or what have you. But queering is just a kind of a regularization of the irregular, which is kind of a weird thing, right? Because if it's irregular, then it's not regular, whatever. So never accuse the left of making coherent arguments. But that's beside the point. The point is that there's a clear objective to try to subvert our culture through subverting our actual values. What are the things that we value and what are the things that we promote? This is the essence of the culture war. And he gave a quick, nod to Marxism, right? Where he talks about Marx. Marx is largely a failed economic theory, right? But as a political theory, it lives on because, Marxism, posited that, hey, eventually the proletariat, the workers, will rise up and they'll go to war with the bourgeoisie and they will prevail. The workers will unite and will take over the world. Well, that never actually happened. Marxism as an economic theory has largely fallen out of favor, but it found new life in cultural Marxism, and where it became about who's got power and who does not. And it's found a special niche in the racial dynamic in the United States in particular. So now you've heard what Ben Shapiro had to say about that. Now I want to show you what my main argument was, because I took an explicitly biblical worldview, and we'll pull that up here. None of you, my beloved subscribers, actually probably watched my video. That's all right. I forgive you, but here, I'll give you a chance to make it up by, look at that. Look at all those views right there. Anyway, I'm not bitter. Let's just watch it. The word community is a mashup of two words, which is common unity. What is the common principle that will unify us? In this case, Jesus had done something that heretofore had been impossible, which is to take two groups of people who had very different views of the world, very different customs, dare I say, very different cultures, and blended them to make them one by unifying them under a common creed. This is the key to understanding unity, but it's also the key to understanding the conflict. You see, that conflict was unavoidable because they valued different things. So there you see my argument, my version of this concept of the culture war, which is that the values that differ. And where Ephesians, which is where I was reading from in the scriptures, Ephesians talked about how there was this natural enmity between the Jew and the Gentile, right? The Jew and the Gentile, and how the Gentile was kind of a far off from God and alienated from the promises and the principles of God. But God, by offering Christ as the unifying figure for both the Jew and the Gentile, made one new man out of both of them by uniting them under the cross, right? And having them commit to a common faith that both of them could share. And that would bridge the cultural and the values gap. And so this was the idea of the enmity being kind of released, it being vanquished by the cross of Christ. And so this is the point that I was making. And so we see this, though, as it takes on a lot of different forms, because many people want to make it about everything except for the thing that it actually is, right? They want to make it about economic status. They want to make it about race. They want to make it about sexuality and all of those things. And it's not about those. Those things are manifestations of different values. They are not the cause. They're symptoms. They're not the root. But I want to give you a real common, a practical way in which this actually plays out in our culture. And this is a debate that I watched about the deletion of people in the womb, if you know what I mean. And so this is a debate that I watched between two guys. This is one gentleman. He's a Catholic gentleman. He goes, I think he has a channel called the Council of Trent or something to that effect. And he's debating the secular guy, this guy that I assume is an atheist. He doesn't say this, but just by the way he talks, I assume he's an atheist. And I want you to listen and observe how far apart they are from a values standpoint. He says something right at the beginning of the debate. That is this guy, he goes by Destiny. He says something at the beginning of the debate that eventually gave the whole game away. And it was kind of odd that the gentleman from the Council of Trent, that he didn't catch it. But let's have a quick look at that little debate and how it went.
The dad's left, mom lost her job. We don't kill toddlers in a really bad situation to try to make it better. We shouldn't do the same to unborn human beings if they have the same value as a toddler does.
So to go back, when you asked me, is something like objectively right or wrong? I don't believe that there is an objective right or wrong. Just like I don't think there's like an objective beautiful or an objective best song or an objective anything like that. Yeah.
So I would say it's evil to rape someone. It is wrong to do that, and it is a fact that no one should ever do that, full stop. Would you just say rape makes you feel bad, you don't like it, you'd prefer people don't do that?
Yeah, that's essentially the non-cognitivist position, right?
Wow. This guy literally just said that he doesn't even believe there's anything called an objective right or wrong. Now, this is odd, right? Right? And this is an important thing to understand, because oftentimes when it comes to these culture war issues, right, we focus on the issues. And here he is making a claim about why it's perfectly, reasonable and okay for a mother to delete her offspring in the womb, and why the other gentleman who comes from a religious perspective is saying this is not right, it's not okay, and we shouldn't do it. In a culture, in a moral society, we shouldn't do that. And he's saying, well, there is no objective moral basis for this. And because their worldviews are so different, there is literally no way for their two systems of thought or values to converge. There's no path where those things will intersect, and therefore there's no possible compromise. And so we have to understand what the source of these beliefs are, what the source of these of how people arrive at their system of values, right? Because we have to change the way people think at the very root, at the very foundation, in order to bring them into our way of thinking, so that we can have a common system of values. But this is the thing that's interesting about this conversation. And I don't want to necessarily watch the whole video, but I just thought it was so interesting that the gentleman that said he doesn't believe in objective moral values and duties effectively doesn't even understand that his whole position is incoherent if there are no objective moral values and duties, which is to say, he is arguing for the so-called right of a mother to end the life of her child in the womb, when he doesn't understand that without objective values and duties, there are no rights, right? It's almost like not understanding. It's like saying, well, I think people have a right to eat cheese, but I don't think people have a right to get dairy. It's like, well, don't you understand that there is no cheese without dairy? All cheese is made from dairy, right? You can't get to the cheese is a derivative of the milk. You understand that? Well, he apparently doesn't understand that rights are a derivative of objective moral values and duties, which is to say, if there are no objective moral values and duties, then there is no such thing as right and wrong. Think about it. The very word itself, rights, rights implies that there is a wrong, implies that there is an incorrect way to go about. That means that if there's an objective standard to which we can apply, then we can say you have an obligation as a person to honor the things that are my rights, right? But if there is no such thing as right and wrong, then you don't have any rights, because I don't have any obligation to honor what is valuable to you. So here's this guy making an entire case for why a woman has a quote unquote right to do something, when he denies the very thing that anchors that right, that gives rights meaning or makes it coherent in the first place. And so this is an important point to understand. I'm not so much interested in arguing with people over issues. We can talk about gay marriage. We can talk about transgenderism. We can talk about deleting children in the womb. We can talk about hookup culture. We can talk to the red pill nation about, the men, about whether marriage is a good deal or not, and women, whether they can do OnlyFans. We can talk about all of these things, but all of these things are downstream from the worldview and the values that these people adopt that make these issues kind of the things that they value. And so we can't focus on the symptoms and not deal with the cause, right? We can't focus on the cough and not deal with the virus. And if I could say anything about the objective of this channel, Todd Thinks, if you come in close, that is what I hope to give you in this channel. In this channel, if you tune in and if you watch all of my stuff, if you watch all the content that I produce, you will come away understanding the way to think about these things so that you can be an informed citizen, an informed person in the world, able to share your worldview in a coherent way that changes the way people think fundamentally, not on an issue by issue basis. Because one of the things that I mentioned also in that culture war video, I encourage you to go watch it, was that in college I had a professor that would give us a test that would be like 5 questions. On the test, the answer to the first question would be the input to the second question, and the input from the third question would be the answer to the second question. And so essentially, if you got the first question wrong, you would get them all wrong, right? Because you started from the wrong place. But the professor was kind enough to say, hey, if you show your work and you can demonstrate to me that if you had the correct input, you would have gotten the right answer because you did you worked it out correctly, then he would give you credit even when you had the wrong answer, but he would have a little note beside it saying, check given the errors above. Well, in a classroom setting and in an academic setting, we can do that, right? We can account for the fact that people are starting from the wrong place and give them credit for their logic from that point on being correct. But in real life, there is no such thing. There's no such thing as check given the errors above. There's no such thing as giving someone credit for having it, quote, right, even though they started from the wrong premises, right? So in life, when you get it wrong, you get it wrong. If you start from the wrong premises and you argue from there, even if your logic is flawless, you will get it wrong at every stage and on every issue, with every argument, on every particular situation that you find yourself in. You'll be getting the wrong answer because you started from the wrong premise. And the first premise is what the Bible has said, and that's declared to us from the beginning, which is that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right? If you don't fear God, and if you don't have a worldview that honors God, that starts with the presupposition that God is true and he is right and he alone is the wise one, able to give us the light, we're stumbling in the dark. We don't have any idea where we're going. We don't have any idea what the consequences of the ideas that we have. It's the same thing with trying to trans the kids. We have no idea what is going to happen, and we're experimenting on a whole generation of people while people die, and many of them have their lives destroyed. How do we deal with that? We start with the fact that God is right, and we go from there. And on this channel, you're going to learn exactly why that's important and how you go about doing that. And more importantly, how you go about convincing those in your immediate circle that that's what you ought to be doing. This video has been a lot longer than I expected, but I thought it was necessary to lay that out as I get a lot of new subscribers, and maybe you're wondering what this channel is about because maybe you saw one video that you liked and you're not really sure what you're going to get here. This is what you're going to get. Just know that. And if you like this and you want more of it, let me know in the comments. Hit that like button so that more people can get this sort of content. Then algorithms will push it out to more people and we'll grow as a community together. I need your input and I need your help to get this message out. So I hope you like, I hope you'll share, I hope you subscribe, I hope you will comment. Until next time, friends, God bless you.